So Thom Singer and I have known each other 20 plus years through National Speakers Association. He has built a speaking career from scratch. And he is currently CEO of the Austin Technology Council. So let's welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. So as she said, I spent 12 years of my life from 2008 until 2020 doing nothing other than speaking at groups and getting a check. I actually had a professional speaking business, and I was just going to ride that out for the rest of my career. You do it for 12 years. I didn't get rich. I wasn't famous. I wasn't one of these people that speakers bureaus were putting everywhere. However, I had a great lifestyle business. I was able to cash flow my daughter through an Ivy Plus school. So it was like, came out with very little debt on that. She went to Carnegie Mellon. And then in 2020, March 13th, I call it the day my business died. And my business went from a $250,000 a year business to almost zero, and I wasn't able to get it back above $50,000 or $60,000. At the time, my other daughter decided she had to go to a more expensive college and got accepted to Dartmouth. And so I went through a couple of really rough years. My wife is the hourly administrator, chapter administrator for a nonprofit, and she plans all their meetings. There were no meetings, so we had everything go down to zero. Then 4 years ago, somebody approached me and asked me if I wanted to help rebuild the Austin Technology Council. And I started doing that, but it doesn't pay what I needed to make. And so I actually negotiated that I could keep my speaking business. And at the time, my speaking business wasn't making very much money. I now make more money in my speaking business than I do at the other, and I'm able to do both of them concurrently. And so there's a lot of creative ways as you get older that you can create your way into a business world. If you have something that maybe doesn't support you, but it makes a little money, maybe you can tack it together. And nowadays, employers are good with that. My board is good with it. There were some people who were worried about a little brand confusion. Fast forward 4 years, my being able to speak. One of the things I'm going to talk today about what I speak to corporate office audiences about, but I also do a speech for any nonprofit in the business world in Austin, or when the chamber is bringing in a delegation from some other city. I do the history of Austin Tech, which many people don't know how Austin became the tech hub that it is. I've lived here for 32 years. I worked at the Chamber of Commerce 31 years ago. I've lived here 35 years ago and moved here then. So I've seen it all, and I actually present that. So I love to get up and talk. I love to share. I have probably spoken here at Launchpad over the years more than a dozen times, probably every year to every other year, as long as this organization's been around, as long as I've been speaking. So let's jump in. Markets have cycles. Technologies change, but human nature stays the same. Right now, we're going through some very high layoffs happening in the world of technology and other companies. A lot of blame is being put on AI, but the reality is that I'm seeing in conversations that I'm having is, yes, AI is coming in, it is disruptive, it is changing some things, but some of the big companies were so exuberant in their hiring in 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and they were willing to pay any price. That in a lot of cases, they're purging out jobs that will reoccur in about 6 months at about 1/3 off of what they were paying before, because they're right-setting the market. And so yes, AI is going to disrupt things. However, at the end of the day, it's not going to change the whole world as bad as a lot of people say. And when I talk to people, especially some of us our age with a little silver in our hair, a lot of people are petrified about what's happening in AI. Working around the tech community here in Austin, I will tell you that you'd better be playing with AI. You'd better be learning how it works and not just using ChatGPT as if it's a really advanced Google, and not using it as a writing tool when you have to respond to an email. There is so much strategy. Before we were talking, I was listening in on some of the stuff we were talking, and I was going to ask a question that I ask when I speak to young professionals, and that is, have you taken your resume, every paper you've ever written, anything that is your skill, and plugged it into Claude or ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever you use, and asked it, what am I not seeing that is a skill that I could market myself for? Somebody was saying earlier, I was in sales, that's all I know how to do. That's actually not true. If you're in sales, you have a lot of skills. You better be using it as a strategy tool to figure it out. I know a young man who is a quant at a hedge fund, and he makes a lot of money. He's one of the smartest math brains in the world. And in thinking about what if, now I don't think quants are going to go away because there's more than just the math involved. Yeah. But if the computer could start reasoning in a way a brilliant mathematician can see things, what happens? And his answer is, I'm a problem solver. I might be a mathematician, but I'm a problem solver. And if my problem goes away, I find another problem. And I've thought about that a lot, and that's true for every single one of us. What problem can you solve that somebody needs solved? Because the market's going to change. New technologies are going to come in, but as a person, there's things that you bring to the table that only you bring to the table. And yet every time you turn on anything, all you hear about is AI. AI this, AI that, and it's funny because wait a minute, I had a slide disappear from my slide deck. So one thing I want to talk about is, and that is so funny that it disappeared because it's my favorite slide. In my lifetime, we've had fax machines, we've had email, we've had the internet, we had cell phones, we had smartphones, now we have AI. Every generation has something that disrupts them. AI is just the next step in that. And everybody pushed back on all of those things. And people said they were just fads, and people said they were going to go away. And then they changed the world. I think AI is the same thing. It's not going to go away, it's not a fad, but it's also, if you look at every disruption, going back hundreds of years to the original printing press, people thought that's going to destroy whatever, and then more opportunities come out. But all we're hearing about at every conference we go to, any job club you go to, everything you do is all about AI. It's AI this, AI that, AI this, AI that, and that's all it's been for 3 years. This year, there are 12 books coming out from major publishing houses, from authors like Adam Grant, Angela Duckworth, the CEO of LinkedIn, and all of those are on the topic of connections and human relationships as they relate to business. Because here's the thing, the best data, the perfect prompt, and the smartest AI, they're not enough. It's human interaction, what I call HI, that is your advantage. And throughout history, when people are looking for jobs, people find most of their jobs through a connection that they know. When my daughter graduated from Carnegie Mellon, she graduated in 2019. She was waiting for her fiance to land where his job was going to be. They ended up moving to Chicago. My daughter is a planner. She said, great, you've landed this great job. I'm going to run our relocation from Pittsburgh to Chicago. She ran their life. They bought a condo. They did all these things. And as soon as she was ready to go look for that career job, 6 months after she graduated, it was February 2020. And everything went away, including their wedding, which was supposed to be May 16th. She ended up sending out over 1,500 resumes through LinkedIn and Indeed and other services over the next 9 months. She heard back from 24 companies. One eventually hired her, but almost nobody replied. Now, she did find it through a blind resume. However, her other good leads came from being involved with the Project Management Institute, being involved with things like that, having connections, light or strong, because people will do business with people they know, like, and trust, but people will also help people that they know, like, and trust. So HI is your advantage in your job search and your advantage in everything that you do moving forward from today. And I'm not here to talk about an elevator pitch. It's important. She talked about that this morning a little bit. You all went around and introduced yourself. You do have to know how to clearly and concisely tell people who you are and what you do so well. However, I think we've done a disservice in the business world by teaching the elevator pitch the way we've taught it, because when I meet people who are looking for a job or they're in sales, they think they're supposed to lead with it. They meet them and they think, oh, I got to tell them about myself, and they sort of, go into their elevator pitch and start talking about themselves. First time you meet somebody, don't tell your mother this, Jay. The person you meet doesn't care about you. Your mother would be so sad to know that, but they don't care about you. Who do they care about? Themselves. So memorizing an elevator pitch and leading with it, not so good. If we got on an elevator together, and for those of you who aren't totally sure what the elevator pitch is, the idea is if you get on the elevator at the 35th floor, you ride down to the lobby, in that amount of time, you could tell somebody who you are and what you do so well. But if we got on that elevator together and I found out you worked for a company or you were on the board of an association that had a budget to hire speakers for the annual conference, I would be like, oh. And if those doors shut on 35 and I flicked a switch in my back and went, hi, my name's Thom Singer, I've written 12 books, I speak at conferences like yours all over the country, just blah, 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 verbal vomit all over you, what would you do when we got to the lobby and the doors opened? Run. I have spoken to over 1,000 audiences over the last 20 years. I have never had anybody say, take you to the Starbucks in the lobby to learn more. Run is what is screamed out from every audience, whether it's 18 people or whether it is 8,000 people. I don't think I've ever spoken to 8,000, but 5,000 people. Run. So what we're doing if we lead with the elevator pitch is we're repelling others. So what you want to do is ask questions to get them to talk. Take an interest in people. Human interaction isn't, I'm going to tell you all about me so you can do something for me. It's got to be a back and forth, and the only way you're going to get back and forth is you start with the other person. But AI is leveling the playing field across the board. Used to be knowledge was power, right? We all grew up in an era where we were taught knowledge was power. You needed to go to school, you needed to get these things. Boy, you needed to have that degree when we were young, right? That gave you a fighting edge. We're moving away from a knowledge economy or a credentials economy, and we are moving into a skills economy. AI is leveling everything because we could pick any topic that I don't know about, and I could spend the weekend asking my AIs to give me the knowledge. And then we could go to that Starbucks and we could sit down and I could talk to you to the point that you would think I studied it in college and that I worked in the industry for 5 years. Over the course of a weekend, I could get enough basic knowledge, enough basic competence to hold my own to speak about anything. And we're seeing this in the speaking industry. Yeah. We're seeing people showing up as an expert in AI who don't know how to turn on a computer. There are people who are suddenly AI experts. As I said, they're saying the biggest topic next year to get paid to speak on is going to be human relationships in business. And I have friends for 20 years who laughed at my topic and called it a soft skill, who are now leading with it on their resume, that they talk about relationships. And I'm like, really? So we've gone from soft to powerful because of the shift that's happened in technology. So we're having a great reset. It used to be that the people who had access had to have certain knowledge. Well, now everyone has the same AI tools and can get that information. Knowledge and competence is just the table stakes to get in the door. When you go in for an interview, everybody expects you to know everything you can about the company, everything you can about the industry, and everything you can about the job. Little side note, people were talking about, or I was going to talk about people finding jobs. I talked to a friend of mine yesterday. He's 35 years old. He's been in tech sales, and he's had a rough go of it over the last 10 plus years. He's been a mediocrely good salesperson, but people, when they were going all those jobs, 18, 19, people would come and hire him away 10 months after he got into a job and offer him a bigger base, offer him a bigger base, offer him a bigger base. A couple years ago, his base as a salesperson was $210,000. Who pays a 34-year-old $210,000 as their base in sales? Yeah, he didn't make quota, he got laid off. He hasn't been able to find a job, partially because his resume is too choppy, partially because everybody's pulling back. He took his Tesla in to get serviced, was talking to the guy at Tesla, and it turns out they don't pay too bad in their car dealership showroom. He interviewed, he's now a Tesla, they call it, relationship manager or whatever, doesn't have a quota, doesn't have that. Now, there are KPIs, there's things he has to perform on, but it's got great benefits. He's working for Tesla, and if he does it for a couple of years, he could take that and parlay into some other type of job back into the tech industry, or he could parlay into other jobs within the company. So he said, at first he was like, that's a step back to go be a car salesman. But then he realized that Tesla is just technology. You know, it's not a car. A Tesla is a huge piece of technology that he adores because he owns one. So, but when he went into the job, he went to AI and learned everything he could about what happens in that job on a daily basis, and it was there. And you have to stand out. Because if you don't stand out, you have to be set apart. And the way you're set apart is how much you're using the tools to set you apart from the other people. You have to remember this. Your career is a relationship business. So you have to be working all the relationships you've ever had. A lot of people go, well, I don't have a network, Thom. Yes, you do. You have a network. We all have crossed paths with people. And they go, well, I haven't talked to that person in 10 years. You know what? If you reached out to somebody and said, oh my God, I've been out of work for a year. I need your help. I haven't talked to you in 10 years and now I need you, then you're a taker. But if you just reached out and said, you know, I thought of you today. I want all of you to think about somebody in your career who was influential, who you had a good relationship, who you haven't talked to in more than 5 years. Just think of who it is. Now, what if you reached out to him and said, I thought of you today? You don't have to say, I was at a jobless club and the speaker made me think of you. Don't say that. You just say, you crossed I thought of you today. I hope you're doing well. In a lot of cases, they're not going to reply. In a lot of places, they're going to say, hope you're doing well too. Boop. In some cases, they're going to reply very much back and you'll be like, hey, like maybe we could jump on the phone, or if they're local, maybe we can grab coffee. And maybe that person will be like, you know, we're looking for somebody just like you. Now, it may not happen, and it may only happen 1 in 50 times. But what if you reached out to 50 people who've crossed paths with, who you've lost touch with over the last 5, 10 years? You only need one. And if you had a good relationship, most people go, it's weird to reach out to somebody I haven't talked to in 5 years. What if somebody reached out to you today and said, Stephen, I thought of you today. You always impressed me when we were together. Would you say, how dare you call me? My God, what's wrong with you? You'd feel good. Put it out there. You're not asking for anything. You're waiting to see where it goes. And if it goes nowhere, God love them. I did this before with a group, and somebody's like, I reached out to 3 people and nobody responded. Maybe I'm not a good person, blah, 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 blah. And then the 4th person responded and they found a job. It just took like 4 weeks for the person to respond, and the person responded because their mother had died. They didn't get back to him right away. Don't make up that you're a bad person because people don't call. People are busy, and people have come to believe their own self-importance. God love them. Just reach out and be nice. But you got to look at the HI side as a strategy as much as we look at the AI side as a strategy. Your human interaction isn't a like, a link, a share, and a follow on social media. It's a strategy of who do I know, how can I help people, how do I show up in the community, and it takes a long time to build a network and become known in the community. And so what I tell people all the time is, you'd better be thinking about what happens next time I'm out of work. What if I get a job and 2 years from now the economy goes sideways and I get laid off from that job? What most people do is they network like crazy, they get the job and they go, screw the networking. And the next time they get laid off, they're like, ah! The way I became a speaker is I was in sales and marketing. And 3 times back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I got laid off by companies that entirely went out of business or closed their Austin office, and it was never my fault. Just saying. Every single time I had a new job within 3 weeks, and I never made an outbound call. 2 of those times I had local companies create a job for it. Well, one of them kind of pushed somebody out to put me in, and I felt bad about that, but I took the job. People said, Thom, how did that happen 3 times where you got hired right away and people created jobs for you? They made room for you. How did that happen? I was really engaged in the community. And somebody's like, would you come talk to my team about how you do that? And I started talking to lawyers and banks and other people about how do you show up in the community over a decade so that you get more opportunities for your job, but so that you have a protection thing. I had a job that I had to entertain a lot, I was out a lot, I traveled a lot, and we had little kids. And when I got laid off and I got the new job, somebody said to my wife, well, I bet you're gonna be happy that he doesn't have to go out as much to community events. And my wife's answer was, he had damn well better go out to community events, because the reason he has a job and insurance and everything else 3 weeks after the company closed is because he does that. So my wife never had a problem with me going out 1 or 2 nights a week. We had a rule when the kids were little that if I had to go to networking events and I would miss dinner, 1 night a week she expected. On Sunday night, we'd go through calendars, find out what night it was, because I can't predict when this organization or that organization or some happy hour is going to happen. So on Sunday nights, we would go through strategically and look at the week's calendar. We knew I was going to be out 1 night every week. Often 2, fine. If it was 3, I had to justify it. If it was 4, I was sleeping on the couch. No. But over a lifetime, my wife's a huge introvert. She would hate to be the person who's going out to all these things that I do. But she knows I'm a big extrovert. She knows I get my energy that way. But she also knows that that's what protected our family all through those years where the economy of Austin has gone up and down and I've seen jobs come and go. So it's a strategy, the way you connect to people. Now here's the thing. Meeting someone once does not make them part of your network. Do you know what meeting someone once makes them? Yeah, a lot of people say acquaintance. Someone said it in the back. It makes them someone you've met once. And there is a huge difference between someone you've met once and someone who you've established a long-term and mutually beneficial relationship with. I tell people it takes 10 times of interacting with somebody, not before they're part of your network. It takes 10 times before they notice you exist, which means you've got to be active for a long time in order for people to notice you exist to move to that next level. So it's a strategy. And here's the thing, not everybody you meet is going to like you. Don't tell your mother. Not everybody's going to like you. You're not going to like it. Not everybody's going to be your cup of tea. You're going to meet people and you're going to be like, nope, no thank you. And some people, it's going to be great, but you just don't have anything in common. You don't come from the right industries. You don't have similar enough backgrounds or interests. That's okay. Not everybody has to become a business relationship. But if you're thinking, I'm going to go meet 3 people, I'm going to have 3 business relationships, you could have no business relationships because one doesn't like you don't like one, and one you have nothing in common with. So you've got to put time into this. Connection is now going to become the currency. Connection is going to be your secret weapon for the job that you have, for moving up inside the company, and for finding a job if you need a job. And this is not about personality. People say all the time, well, Thom, you're an extrovert. This works out great. I'm going to tell you an important secret. How many people in the room self-identify as more of an introvert on that introvert-extrovert spectrum? I know, stupid question. Introverts don't raise their hands. Introverts are better at networking. And people look at me like, what? Introverts are better at networking because when they meet someone for the first time, introverts don't want to talk about themselves. They don't even want to be at the event. So they'll ask more questions and they'll listen more intently. If you ask more questions, you learn more about the other people. If you listen intently, a day later, you're going to think like, oh my gosh, he's looking for a programming job. I'm not looking for a programming job, but that just came across my thing. Let me call that person and make that introduction. So introverts, our society has crowned the extrovert as the king of all this. Take it back. You're better at it. Show up, ask some questions, and it's not about liking people. My wife's an extreme introvert. She loves people one at a time, not 500 at a time.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming and it drains you. The definition of introvert-extrovert is introverts get drained by doing the social stuff. Extroverts get fired up. I will spend an hour with you today. The rest of my day I'll be like, I was at the job club. Yay. So it's not about personality. The extroverts can do just as much, but know yourself. If you get drained, go home and take a nap. Go to the spa. Do whatever you have to do. But you got to be intentional about this. You can't say, okay, connection is going to be my currency. I'll just see what happens. You have to be deliberate over time in how you interact with people. And you have to realize that it's a skill that you learn and you practice and you improve. Even I have to improve. Being an extrovert, I like to talk a lot. I was the kid who got the note sent home from the second grade teacher. Mrs. Singer, see me, he talks too much in class. When we were cleaning out my parents' home after they died, we found that note to my mother. My brother comes out and goes, what do you charge for a keynote? This lady owes you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's go find your second grade teacher. But it can be improved. I have to learn to listen more. I have to learn to give other people a chance to talk. I have to learn to put other people in the spotlight, but I learn it. One of the problems with social media, we have been led astray that talk about yourself, talk about yourself, talk about yourself, talk about yourself. How many times do you go on LinkedIn and you ever see anybody say, wow, I met someone today and they were impressive. Here's who they are and why they're so great. You don't see it very often. Sometimes you see it when they're trying to, what's the technical term for it? Kiss their ass. However, I do a thing every Saturday called Cool Things My Friends Do. I have a speaking business and I run a high-profile organization. I have to post a lot to get people to go to the things the Tech Council does. I have to post a lot to remind people I'm a speaker. It's really weird when one of my fraternity brothers said, we had a speaker at our company meeting, 500 people. The speaker wasn't very good. And I'm like, well, you should have hired me. Who hired the speaker? I did. And I'm like, you did? Why didn't you call me? I mean, we lived in the frickin' frat house together 40 years ago, but still. And he goes, I forgot you did that.
Oh my.
And I said to him, how many professional speaker friends do you have? And his answer was, you. So you have to tell people what you do over and over when your best friend from college doesn't remember what you do. However, my point is that you got to talk about other people once in a while too, because people notice it, they like it. So every Saturday I do a thing called Cool Things My Friends Do. Number one, I'm praising other people. They're not people I'm trying to kiss their butt. Lots of times they're people who are starting out, whatever. But here's the key. All week long, my strategy is, when it comes to human interaction, I have to be paying attention to what my friends are doing. Now, being a professional speaker, I have friends who write books. I have friends who launch podcasts. Being in the Tech Council, I have friends who launch companies or get massive funding. But it means all week, as I scroll, it's not who can do something for me, who can do something for me, it's who's doing something really interesting that would be fun to talk about. So you don't just have to do it on LinkedIn, you have to do everything. Think about how are you talking up people? How are you talking up your community? And it's about engagement, right? It is absolutely about engagement. So I'm going to give you a tip, especially those of you who are a little more introverted, a little more shy, and that is E equals MC squared. And you're looking at me going, what does Einstein have to do with this? Someone screamed one time, theory of relativity? And I'm like, that was clever. I never thought of that. It has nothing to do with Einstein. I just took E equals MC squared to give it to you as a simple way to remember how to do all this HI stuff. And that is, just remember, engagement is a meaningful connection between two or more people. So many times people walk into like a big community event and they're thinking, I got to find a job. I got to talk to who here can help me. Don't go in thinking that. First of all, walk in and think, who can I help? I'm going to meet somebody I can help. Changes your whole dynamic in the big room. Who can I meet that maybe I could be a conduit to help? All of a sudden, that changes your whole personality. But the second thing is, if you remember, you don't have to meet all 500 people. Some people walk in the room and go, did everyone go to high school together? They all know each other. I'd walk in late and people are like, do they all know each other? No, they're just people who show up at a community event. You're not talking to 500 people, you're just talking to the 1 or 2 people you're in a conversation cluster with. So remember, just have a meaningful conversation with whoever's in front of you and don't be better dealing people. You ever been at a networking event where you're talking to somebody and they're looking over your shoulder, scanning the room, like who in the room would be better to talk to? Who's got a better resume? Who could do that? Don't better deal, just be engaged with who you're with. Keep it short if they're not the right person, but be polite and move on and find somebody else. But you got to remember that it's trust and reputation that are going to drive all of the opportunities. There is so much noise out there, and AI has doubled the amount of noise that's coming out on LinkedIn and other social media because people are just having it right for them and posting. People are posting 4 or 5 times a day who couldn't write a sentence a year ago. But what is trust? Trust is simple. I am a licensed trainer for an organization called the Trust Edge Leadership Institute out of Minneapolis. And they basically say trust is simple. People have put all this thing on, oh, we got to build trust. We got to be a trusted advisor. We need people to trust us. Trust is simple. It's just a confident belief in a person or product or company, but it's a confident, easy belief. And you want to be a person who builds that, but you can't walk into the room going, trust me. Hey, everybody, you're looking to hire somebody? Hello, hiring manager. Trust me. Trust me. You can't hypnotize them into trusting you. So you have to do it through little, small things. And trust can be transferred. So if you know the hiring manager's next door neighbor, and you've gone to church with them, or you used to work with them, and they go in and say, oh my God, I work with Donnie. You know, Donnie's great, I heard he's interviewing with you tomorrow. That trust transfers. So work your network when you can, because if someone who really trusts you has trust with that other person, part of that will transfer. Because your brand precedes you everywhere you go. In 1997, there was an article in Fast Company magazine. It was by Thom Peters. Some of us are old enough to remember the name Thom Peters. He was the #1 author of the mid-1990s in the business space. I think he invented the term leadership by walking around.
Leadership by observation.
Leadership by walking around, yeah, that's what he called it. Yeah, Thom Peters was the guy. He was one of the most prolific professional speakers back before there was even a real industry of professional speakers. Thom Peters wrote an article called The Brand Called You. If you Google Fast Company Brand Called You, 1997, there's a follow-up article in the 2000s. But the picture that was on the cover of the magazine was like Tide soap, like a brand, but it said You in the middle. But it looked like the old yellow and orange box of Tide. So you can go read the article. The article holds up. You got to realize this article was written 1997. Few people had computers. Nobody had smartphones. I mean, few people had the flippy, maybe, you know, whatever. But 1997, there was none of this technology. And his answer was, how do you build your brand? You do it one day at a time, one step at a time, one person to person. There's no excuse now because we have all these great tools, but you have to go back to basics. I tell people all the time when I speak, everyone's looking for a shortcut. They go, Tom's going to talk to us about AI and networking. There's going to be a shortcut. I can just ask AI to go network for me and I can sit and drink a margarita. No, you got to go back to basics. Pretend for a moment we have no technology. How would you look for a job? How would you look for clients? How would you look for people who could introduce you to somebody? Make that part of your HI strategy is how would I do it if the technology didn't exist? And then use the technology. That's how you win. But I'd recommend finding that article online and reading that article. So your brand is going to precede you everywhere you go. And that's what he said in that article is whether you think you have a personal brand or not, you do. If you belong to a faith community, people in that faith community have an opinion. Nobody's gossipier than a church. I grew up in a church. Nobody is gossipier than the church. People, have you ever noticed that church ladies have opinions? It's true in every organization we go to. Your brand has preceded you. How you treated somebody 5 years ago. I have a saying that I tell people, and that is if I have not had a conversation with you in 5 years, we don't know each other. Because hopefully you've grown. God knows hopefully I've grown because I need to keep growing. But if you don't know, haven't talked to somebody in 5 years, you don't know them. I was talking to someone the other day and they were bad-mouthing a mutual friend who has gone through some hard times, made some really bad mistakes, but has gone to therapy, has gone to his pastor, and is really coming out the other side. They didn't know any of that, and they were bad-mouthing him for things that were done 10 years ago. And I said, you know, I believe in redemption. When's the last time you encountered this person? They go, I haven't talked to him in years. I'm like, well, how do you know? You know, so keep your mouth shut if you haven't talked to him. If you haven't talked to somebody in 5 years, you don't know them. But his brand is hard to break. So you want to always be putting out the good brand because it's preceding you everywhere you go. So you're going to be remembered by every interaction that you have. So when you interact with somebody, there's three ways you leave them. Indifferent, nothing changed. Worse, they feel like crap, excuse my language, because of something you said, something you did, you dismissed them, you were critical of them, whatever. Or they feel better. What's the only way to leave people? Feeling better. If you just say, every time I interact with someone, how can I make them just at least neutral? But neutral doesn't get you anywhere. Put your car in neutral and you just sit there, unless you're on a hill. Just sit there. So what you want to do is you want to say, how can I try to leave people a little better than before they met me today? Because you're going to be remembered. And people get referred and get hired are the ones who stay top of mind. And not necessarily with the person who's going to hire you, but with the people who do the referring. You want to stay top of mind. You want that top of mind to be like, they always make life better when they're around. Second thing is this all goes beyond the resume. Like I said, we are moving from a resume and knowledge culture to a skills-based culture, and you have to be able to prove your skills. Putting them on paper goes partial the way, but you've got to be able to say it and you have to be known for it. Your brand has to be, that's what you do. My young friend who's a problem solver, that's what he's known for. I mean, he's also a genius, but he's a problem solver. When he was in college, his sports team was going, he played ultimate frisbee, his sports team was going to a tournament, and they had 3 cars. And the front car texted and said, we've got a problem. We're out of gas, and we didn't know it. We're pegged on empty. And everybody in both other cars was Googling, where's the nearest gas station? And people were like, it's 10 miles ahead. And this guy said, you know what, let's get off at this off-ramp, and we'll turn around, because the topography, we're going uphill. There's a gas station farther back, but it's all downhill. If they run out of gas, we could push them in the slow lane, downhill. We can't do it uphill. They turned around, they went back. They never did run out of gas, but people were like, in college, like, holy who would think of that? He's a problem solver. Everybody who were in those 3 cars, if they ever run across him in the future, his brand is, he's a problem solver, because that's what you do. So it goes beyond your resume. And then you want to remember, we live in a world where it's for the last 10 years, it's been social media. It's been likes, links, shares, follows. It's been fluff. It's been influencers. We're going into a world where people are going to want to start seeing proof. We're getting into a results-driven world because there's been a lot of BS fed to a lot of people. A lot of people, they were saying, you know, a lot of companies were like, oh, we need to get rid of the people with this and we need to bring in these younger people. The knowledge doesn't transfer if you get rid of the older people. And so all of a sudden you're starting to see not older people being laid off as much as they're trying to keep some of that and all that. So they're looking for the results. And if you're known for getting results, if you're known for being that problem solver and you have measurable business results, it's good. And being known for a person who relates well to people inside the company, with the clients and in the industry, that reputation goes a long way. Now, as you're trying to meet people and you're trying to do this, people are like, well, how do you build relationships, Thom? Relationships are built through shared experiences. That's how we build relationships. I want you all to think back. Some of you went to college, some of you may not. Think back to high school or college. I'm going to assume everybody went to high school. Sometimes people go, I didn't even do that. You know, God love them. I actually think people who didn't do things the traditional way, their day is coming. I think people are looking to non-traditional ways of building your life. That being said, think back to high school or college. Who do you keep up with today? Is it somebody from a freshman year class who you saw once in a while on campus and went, hey, dude? Or is it a person you went on spring break with? Is it somebody you lived in the dorms with? Is it people that you worked on projects with? Is it people you played sports with? My guess is it's the latter. The experience you shared, that's who you keep in touch with today, not randos who you cross paths with. So be thinking about, what am I doing that shares experience? Well, participating every week at Launchpad can be a shared experience. If you come in and you talk to people, and afterwards you talk to each other, what did you think of the speaker? I thought he was fabulous. What did you think of the information that we learned last week? That was really helpful, or it doesn't work with my job search. Good and bad, talk about. I tell people every time I speak at a big conference, whether I do main stage or a breakout, I tell everybody when you walk out of the room, I want you to talk about this. Don't talk about me. If you don't like my shoes, I'm old, I can wear tennis shoes now. But talk about something you learned with other people, because being in a room and listening to a speaker, it's a shared experience. Now this is somewhat a one-way experience. However, you can make it a multi-way experience by if you talk to other people and say, how will you implement what this speaker said? And every week you have different topics. So if you're looking and you come every week, you start to recognize each other and you start to talk. I saw you here 3 weeks ago. We haven't talked yet. Share the experience of being in the room. Don't just say, thank you very much, Thom, yay, and run to your car. Take a minute. There are so many donuts out here. They must have thought that I was going to draw 600 people this morning because there are more donuts than a human can eat. So stop, get a donut, have some coffee, and talk to somebody else. Share the experience of being here and ask them, what's your biggest challenge? Number one question you can ask somebody in a shared experience, in the job hunt shared experience, is what's your biggest challenge? And here's the thing. 19 out of 20 times, they're going to tell you their biggest challenge, and you're going to say, wow, that's a big one. Good luck with that. But 1 out of 20 times, you might hold the answer. I one time was talking to somebody. He sold to doctors. And he's like, yeah, there's this one doctor. He won't take my call. He runs a big private practice. I can't get to him. And he goes, do you know anybody in the medical practice? And I said, no, not really, other than my doctor. No. And he goes, I'm trying to reach, and he says the person's name. And the guy lives on my block. I don't know him very well, but he lives on my block. And so I waited until I saw the guy at the mailbox, and I said, hey, a friend of mine sells whatever the service was. He's trying to reach you. And I told him you're a really great guy. Next time he got an email from him, he called him back and says, I'm calling you back because Thom says you're a really great guy. So sharing the experience of what his biggest challenge was, took one call. Turns out they didn't buy his product. This story would be so much better if they had bought his product. And you know what other professional speakers tell me? Tell the audience he bought the product. I can't do that. They didn't buy the product, but he got the meeting. That's his biggest challenge. But as you're talking to people are like, I don't relate well to people. I'm a little more introverted. What do? Look for what I call uncommon or unique commonalities. And those unique commonalities are little things you have in common with someone in the room that not everybody else does. That's why when you meet somebody, instead of talking about yourself, you ask questions. Because if you ask a lot of questions, you might find something in common, and it doesn't happen with everybody. But if you find something in common, it fast forwards that relationship in ways you can't even imagine. Get the right question, you find the right answer. Now you guys have something in common. I was speaking to one of these big conferences, 1,000 people, multi-tiered room. And it wasn't part of my speech. I didn't have a slide, I didn't even have a story, but as you've noticed, I go off on a little tangent here and there. I went off on a little tangent in my speech, and I dropped the name of my high school. I was just like, yeah, that happened in class of 1984, Arcadia, California, Arcadia High. And this woman in the rafters screams, "Go Apaches!" And I start laughing. I can't see who it is because it's a big room, and I'm like, clearly, somebody went to my high school. After the speech, please come down here. And I went on with the whole speech. Afterwards, and this was in Phoenix, I'd grown up in California, live here, conference was in Phoenix. 3 people out of the several thousand came up to the stage. 2 of them didn't shout. One of them had gone to Arcadia High. The woman who shouted had gone to Arcadia High. She was much younger than I was. So even my friends who had little brothers were too old to know them. There was no gap. But they lived in the same little area and stuff like that. We had a great talk. One of the people was a little closer to my age. We kind of thought we knew some people in common. And the other person was currently on the school board for that city. He didn't go to school there, but he lived in the city and he was on the school board. And the 3 of us took a picture. It ended up in the alumni newsletter that we spoke at a conference, and we all discovered we went to Arcadia High. Did anything become of it? No. But was it fun? Yes. And you find those uncommon commonalities, something could come from it. So years ago, my background isn't technology. My background was marketing for companies who sold to the tech system in the growing years of late 1900s, early 2000s here in Austin. So I worked for law firms, banks, and consulting firms as sales and marketing. And I became a professional speaker, and I was speaking to a lot of law firms and banks and professional services firms. But this meeting planner saw me, and she worked for a big national tech organization that they're all CIOs, all tech engineers, CTOs, CIOs in the audience. And there were going to be 600 of them. And the meeting planner said, my introverted CIOs need this message really bad. You need to speak at my conference. However, we have a problem. The CEO of the organization only puts engineers on the stage because he falsely believes engineers only want to hear from engineers. And I said, I run into that in the law firm world. They think, oh, they only want to hear from people with JDs. They only want to hear from other lawyers. I go, but halfway through my speech, they realized that if I was a really good lawyer, I'd be practicing law, not speaking at their conference. And I go, same thing is true with engineers. They'll give me a break, and if I do a good job, they'll come in. So she sets up a phone call. So I looked the CEO up, and this is about, I don't know, 15 years ago. He was about 15 years my senior, so he was about 60 at the time, I think, and because that's what I am now. And he had gone to Carnegie Mellon University. So this was, I'll tell you when it was 11 years ago. He'd gone to Carnegie Mellon University, and that's when Jackie was a freshman. And I get him on the phone, and I said to him, I saw on LinkedIn that you went to Carnegie Mellon. This guy got so excited. You have never met an alumni of a college who loved his alma mater more than this man loved his alma mater. He got so excited that I just said the word CMU. I think Scotty dogs started barking. That's their symbol. If you know Carnegie Mellon, you know what their color is? Plaid. That is their official color. Plaid. Like the Scotty dog plaid. I think plaid like fell all over his office. The guy was so excited. He goes, did you go to CMU? And I said, no, all my money does. And he laughed, and we started talking about the city of Pittsburgh, how much he had loved living in Pittsburgh many years earlier. We talked about the restaurants that were still there. Oh, your daughter has to go eat the hot dog at the place over by Pitt, and blah, blah, blah. We started talking about that, and I'd been there several times, and we were going back and forth about it. And he turns to the person who was sitting next to him. It was an audio call, but he turns to her and says, send him a contract. He'll be perfect. We never talked about the details about what I was going to say. He knew what my topic was, and she had pitched me. But we never talked about it. We didn't even talk about a fee, so I doubled it. No, that's not true. But so anyway, when you find that unique commonality, it can fast forward that relationship and lead to those opportunities. So what are the practical applications? How do we make this work in your world? Well, we have to remember this. We live in a world with declining friendships. They've been studying this for like 50 years, and what they found is women used to have what they said was about 7 close friends. And men said they had about 5 close friends. And by close friends, is the people you tell what's going on, good and bad you share with. Car breaks down, hey, will you drive me, back from the repair shop? Women now say they have 3 or 4 close friends, and men say they have 2. It's dropped by half over 4 decades over these types of surveys. So the amount of friendships is going down. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was Surgeon General of the United States under Barack Obama and under Biden, so for 12 years he was Surgeon General, he did a study of all the problems going on in our country, and he traced a lot of them back to what he called the epidemic of loneliness. And he said people are feeling more disconnected. He wrote most of this after he was done with the Obama administration. He wrote about the epidemic of loneliness before COVID. A lot of people identified that their social circle came from work. They didn't have a lot of friends, but they had people at work. That was their social outlet. Then we sent everybody home for 2 or 3 years, and people got disconnected. And people who naturally didn't like socializing just got into the habit of not socializing. We're seeing it in the younger generation. The people who are now in their mid-20s, they don't know how to behave when they show up, when they have to get back to the office. We're bringing everybody back to the office. You worked remotely from the time you graduated college until you're 29 years old. Welcome. And they literally go to their cubicle and they don't talk to anybody. We're seeing this as a huge problem. And we need to make sure that we're seeing the other people around us, because people are lonely, people are depressed, people are feeling that way. Some of you might be going through that. And I am not too proud to stand up here and say when my business collapsed in 2020 through 21 and I went from making a decent income to making no money for 2 years, I went through a mental health crisis. And I wasn't going to talk about it. I come from the generation where my dad would have told me, suck it up, buttercup. But when I started talking about it, people came up to me and said, thank you. People like you, meaning middle-aged white guys, I guess. People who look like you don't talk about mental health crises. So I talk about it in my speeches now, because you know what? I'm not ashamed of it. I knew I was in a problem. It took me a while, but I was ready to spiral. And I knew I needed help. I talked to my wife. I said, I need to find somebody. And I talked around. I called friends who'd been through similar type things, and I found a therapist. And for 3 years, I went to a therapist. And he told me he needed to put me on medication. And I said, that's a failure. I can't go on medication. And then I allowed him to put me on medication. And you know what? I got better. And I worked on it. But I did it because I had people in my life who supported me. I didn't really talk to a lot of people about it. My siblings didn't know. They're 10, 12, and 14 years my senior. I'm really close with one of them. He knew, which meant he told the others, because anytime you tell one person something, they tell everybody else. My older brother was very worried because he knew how bad it was. He was very worried about me, but he couldn't say anything because I didn't say anything. I had one friend, though. She called me all the time. She called my wife once in a while to check in on me. She's my best friend in the speaker business. You know, you say the term work husband, work wife. You know, her and her husband and my wife and I go on trips together. We're very, very close. She lives up in Milwaukee. When I got to the other side, I said to her, did you put a reminder in your phone to call me? And she said, every 5 days for a year and a half. Now, I confided in her over time of what was going on, so she knew. But she called me every 5 days. She goes, sometimes I missed. Go a week, I'd be out giving a speech or something, I didn't do it. She goes, but every 5 days I got a reminder to call you or to call your wife and just see how you were doing. And she goes, and I did it until I felt like you didn't need me to call all the time anymore. Are you that type of person for someone in your life where you would put a reminder in your phone just to check in every week? That's what we need to have. And if you need to have that type of person, I say, be that type of person. But the problem we have is the average American, this is a new study that came out recently, the average American spends 2 hours and 20 minutes on social media or AI a day. A day. 2 hours and 20 minutes on social media or AI every single day. Now, a couple of you are looking at me like, not me. That means the person next to you is doing 4 hours and 40 minutes because that's an average. Right. I spoke at the University of Texas to a bunch of college kids, and I said, how many of you could take 20 or 30 minutes off your phone to go to that common area in the dorm, to go to some area where so call a friend and say, let's go get a burger. 30 minutes every day where you just connect with other people off the phone. Not a text, not an email. I said you can use the phone to actually call. That would count. But not using it in the way, phones are great for everything but being a phone. But you can still use it as a phone. 2 hours and 20 minutes a day is what people are putting in. And we have an epidemic of loneliness. They're feeding each other. Loneliness is feeding more screen time. Screen time is feeding more loneliness. And social media set us up to believe that relationships were performative. Here I am giving a speech. Here I am climbing to Tiger's Nest in Bhutan. By the way, I do that. If I climb to Tiger's Nest in Bhutan, that picture's going on the internet. It did. However, relationships aren't performative. Relationships are relationships. And they exist only when we're committed to the other people that are on there. So here's what you need to do now. You need to think about what are my daily behaviors, right? Don't run from AI, embrace AI, learn AI, use it as a strategy tool. Find new ways to use AI. Find ways to let AI tell you what your strengths are so that you can be excelling. However, do this too. And that is, what are the small intentional actions that you can do to consistently build your own HI over time? What's the blueprint you can build, the HI blueprint that you can build that's going to allow you to have better relationships over time? The second thing is it's like compounding interest. It takes time, right? They say if you invest a lot of money when you're in your 20s in your 401k or your IRA, it's going to be worth a lot later on. Turns out it's true. I've worked for myself now for 20 years. Well, I have 401k again, but I worked for myself for a long time and I didn't have the money to really contribute because I had 2 kids in college and all this other stuff. But my retirement looks good because when I was in my 20s, I bought into that 7 to 10%. Every single paycheck goes away. So you start early, it's going to pay off later in bigger numbers. Same thing is true with relationships. There's an old Chinese saying, the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. Second best time to plant a tree is today. So, yes, it would have been great if 30 years ago you'd started building these relationships and really helping people and showing up in your community and volunteering and doing the things that really mattered. That would be awesome. But if you didn't start today, realize it's going to take time. It might not help you in this job search, but it'll help you in something later. And then finally, choose people. Put your phone away when you're sitting with people. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and while you're talking, they're doing this? You ever been in a conversation like that? When you're talking and they're scrolling, what do you think of them? What comes to mind? They're not interested, they're not paying attention. Any other word come to mind? It's rude. Every single audience, it's rude. So I have a question for you. What do you call it when you do it to them? When someone's talking to you and you're scrolling, what do you call it? When you're doing it, you call it absolutely necessary. We call it efficiency. We call it efficiency. We call it multitasking. That's right. It is multitasking when I do it. When you do it, it's rude. So my thought is, is when you're with people, put your phones away. Put them aside. When you go to dinner, tell everybody, let's do a phone stack. The college kids do this. Phone stack. Phones stacked on the middle of the table. Anybody touches or reaches for their phone, whether it rings or not, before the bill is paid, you buy all 4 people to dinner, all 3 other people, you buy their meal. College kids don't have money. Guess who doesn't touch their phone? The college kids. My 24-year-old daughter deleted TikTok. I literally thought the Antichrist was showing up that day. That was the horseman. But she said, I don't need to spend that time. She uses Instagram. She uses some other stuff. But she's like, she goes, TikTok, she goes, the algorithm just was sucking me into all kinds of things. She goes, I just didn't need to do it. The younger people are starting to realize this. So we all need to realize it. It's not multitasking or efficiency if you're with somebody. It's choosing not to choose people. And I think your future success depends on how well you interact with people. And this is true within your family. This is true, my father, when he passed away, people would come visit him all the time because he had always been a really good man who always treated people really well. There were other people in his retirement home who he said never got visitors. They had people, and they lived in it. My dad had moved far away. We put him near my brother. People would come out of their way to come see him. He goes, there's people who lived 10 minutes from here who never have had a visitor. It all comes back to you. So it's not just about work, right? Because it's not just business. So here's the thing. I've talked to you for the last 42 minutes about how if you do this, it's going to help you find a job, it's going to help you have a better career. If you're in sales, it's going to help you make more sales. It's going to help you do all that. But it's not just about business. Because anytime you interact with other humans, other carbon-based life forms, the person on the other side of that relationship has their own stuff going on in the world, right? You guys know what stuff is? Sometimes it's good stuff. Someone gets promoted. Someone's getting to take that round-the-world cruise they always dreamed about. Somebody gets married. Maybe they have kids. Maybe they have grandkids. I hear the grandkid thing is even better than the kid thing, but my kids don't seem to have an interest, so whatever. I've hit the son-in-law lottery twice, and nobody's having kids, but come on. But here's the thing. It's good stuff. I asked a woman one time, because if I'm at a big multi-day conference and I speak, I'll ask people when I'm at coffee hour, I'll be like, what's your good stuff? I had a woman tell me like a year ago, my husband and I sold our business for $42 million last week. That's good stuff. When you hear somebody has good stuff, celebrate it. Tell them congratulations. If you know somebody who gets promoted or finds a job, somebody in this group finds a job, buy them a cup of coffee, give them a hug, do whatever it is. Celebrate the good stuff when people have good stuff. Don't be jealous that someone else has good stuff and you don't have good stuff. Celebrate the good stuff. Be known as the person who celebrates the good stuff. But here's the thing to remember. Sometimes bad things happen to really good people. And people who have bad stuff. They're dealing with depression. They get fired. Their business goes out of business. Maybe they're dealing with aging parents and everything you have to deal with in that stage of life. Or maybe their spouse gets sick. Or worse, something happens to one of their kids. And they're part of your extended network. I'm not talking about your brother, your cousin, your next door neighbor. I'm talking about people you just sort of know through your network. And you know they're going through a rough time. And the reason you know they're going through a rough time is people talk. It's like my one brother telling another brother. Humans are wired to tell stories. It's not gossip. It's how we're wired. People tell other people in a community what's going on. You didn't hear this from me, but they have this problem. And everybody knows. And when they see him, they don't know what to say. So do you know what they say? Nothing. They look at him. Maybe they walk away. Maybe they talk about football or the weather. They don't know what to say, so they don't say anything. And that's when people need you the most. When people are going through some bad stuff, that's where they need the people in their network to say, I got you. I see you. And I know this firsthand. Because when my youngest daughter was born, before I tell you the story, she's the 24-year-old who graduated from Dartmouth. Everything worked out fine. But it didn't start that way. When Kate was born, she was born with a condition where the bones in her head had fused together and it wasn't diagnosed. So every time we'd go to the doctor, they'd measure her head. Those of you who have kids, they're always measuring their heads. Something wasn't right, but they never knew what it. We kept asking. They kept saying heads are funny. The doctor literally told me one time in the first 4 months of her life, look around when you're walking around. Everybody's got a different shaped head. People just have different shaped heads. Do it sometime. Don't do it right now. But there's different shaped noggins out there. But we kept asking. And he said, well, there's this thing where the bones can fuse together, but 80% of the time it happens to boys. It's probably not that. And he goes, and the only way we're going to find out is we do a CAT scan. We got to expose her to radiation. We'd have to be really sure. We thought it could be that. And we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Her head was looking more like a watermelon than a cantaloupe. It was an elephant man-like deformity starting to happen. And babies have heads about this big, and they become this big. So we did the CAT scan because my wife said we have to make decisions that 24-year-old Kate wants us to make. CAT scan came back positive for a thing called sagittal synostosis. It looked like someone had soldered her head shut from soft spot to soft spot. And they told us we had two options. We could do nothing and raise a kid with a socially limiting handicap, was what they called it. They said she'd be teased. There might be a little brain damage from the pressure, but her head could never grow this way. It would always grow this way. Or before she turned 6 months old, and by the way, we were diagnosed about 5 months old, they could do surgery where they would remove the entire cap of her skull. And they told us if we do it before 6 months old, we don't have to do bone grafts because the bones will probably grow back on their own. What part of that is not reassuring? Probably. We knew we had to make the decision Kate would want, even though there were some risks. 90% no problem, 10% minor problem to catastrophic problem. But we had to take that risk because if Kate was 24 and she found out we didn't take the risk, she'd never forgive us. We had to do what 24-year-old Kate would want us to do. So we started looking for a doctor. If you go back 24 years, Dell Children's Hospital didn't exist here in Austin. We didn't have the top doctors. So my wife would get on planes and fly to different cities every couple of days with Kate, with the CAT scan and with Kate, to see doctors, to find out what was the best option. But I had a high-profile job. The company I was part of was sponsoring a lot of events, doing a lot of things. We would have to show up, and people would look at me, and they'd walk to the bar. People I knew couldn't talk to me. People I barely knew would be like, out of the way. But there were other people who would look at me, people I didn't even know. They'd walk over and they'd bear hug me. And they'd say things like, I was standing in a group one time and I was talking to people and they said, two women and a guy, and the two women said, each of them very different religions, said, my church group prays for Kate every day. I've put her on the prayer list. Very different religions and different from mine. But that was awesome. You never say no to a prayer. The guy in the group pulls me over into the corner and he goes, Thom, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in a higher power. I thought what they said was beautiful, but I don't believe in that. But I want you to know I care every bit as much. And he hugged me. I can feel the hug just telling the story. And then he added, and I live in your neighborhood. I didn't know that. I didn't know the guy very well. He goes, I live in your neighborhood and I run by your house every morning. And when I do, I send good vibes towards that baby. I would wake up every morning and look out the blinds and expect to see somebody running by sending good vibes towards Kate. I tell you this story not because you're ever going to need a pediatric neurosurgeon, but we talked to a lot of them. And we settled on one. And then one night, the phone rang at 1:30 in the morning. And I answer the phone. The person identifies himself, and he wasn't a 1:30 in the morning kind of friend, if you know what I'm talking about. It was somebody from the business network. And I'm like, yeah? And he goes, Thom, I just got off the phone with my first cousin. Yeah? And he goes, my first cousin's one of the top 3 pediatric neurosurgeons in the country. I'm like, who's your cousin? He told me, read about the guy, pioneering. Couldn't get in to see him for 3 or 4 months because everybody from around the world came to see him. We tried to get in, couldn't get in. So we'd settled on someone else. And I told this person that, and the guy said something I'll never forget. He said, Thom, you're talking about Kate. Don't settle. My cousin's expecting your call at noon Pacific time. The next day, I called Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego at noon Pacific time, 2 o'clock here. They patched me through to Dr. Meltzer's nurse. She said, Mr. Singer, he's expecting you. A moment later, I'm on the phone with one of the top pediatric neurosurgeons, and we spent almost an hour on the phone talking about the questions I needed to ask the doctor that we had. He had pioneered a new way to do the surgery that was less invasive, less swelling, less time in the hospital, less bleeding. And he said, I want to see Kate. Can you or your wife get out here tomorrow or the next day? And I said, wait a minute. How many times have you done this new surgery? And he said, 13. My God, I wanted him to say 497. The next day, my wife flew to San Diego with Kate. She called my cell phone that night and said, it's the first doctor to show any urgency. I think we're supposed to be here. He wants to do the surgery on Friday. The next morning, I went into HR at the law firm that I worked for, and I got them to get the insurance company to fast-track approval on the surgery in another state. Couldn't happen today. Imagine an insurance company saying, sure, we'll help you. 24 years ago, we got it approved. The next morning, my 5-year-old Jackie and I got on an airplane and we flew to San Diego. At 7 in the morning on a Friday morning, we handed Kate over to the doctors, to the cousin of someone who I knew through human interaction. And 4 hours later, they called my cell phone and said the words I will never forget. They said, Kate is gonna be fabulous. And today, Kate is fabulous. Kate is a recent graduate of Dartmouth College 2 years ago. She is an environmental biologist. She's currently working as a land steward in Wisconsin, specializing in prairie natural plant restoration. I've got pictures, I gotta put them in here, of Kate in a full fire suit doing controlled burns. Kate's a badass. She's brilliant. She has a science degree from Ivy League College, and she is a tough one. You don't cross Kate Singer. But I will tell you something. She has no memory of what she went through as a child. Her mother and I will never forget. And I tell you this story because you probably will never need a doctor like that, but you will need something in your life. You will need something in your family, in your community, in your business, in your faith community, in your friend circle. And if you choose people all along the way, someone just might call you at 1:30 in the morning. But if you're always on your phone, if you're always running back home, not talking to anybody before you leave, you're just ships that cross in the night, they won't know you at all, so they won't hear the story. If they don't hear the story, they can't call you at 1:30 in the morning. That's why I tell you this story. It's not just about business. Choosing people, investing in HI in our AI crazy world is the secret weapon to ongoing success. So be curious about the people you meet, because that's how you learn about them. But the other thing is, success leaves clues. If you ask a lot of questions of successful people, find people who went through it, who are our age, who got laid off a year ago, who found a job a year later. Talk to somebody who's 71 interviewing for an IT job and might get it. How'd you do it? Because success leaves clues, even if they don't want to share. Successful people often can't have it. They're dropping an idea, a theory. They're just, if you get them to talk, they're leaving little clues all along the way. Technology is not the advantage. It's important. But everybody now has access to technology. 40 years ago, if you had the best technology, you were ahead of all your competitors, whether it's a job search or in a company. I'm going to tell you right now that all your competitors have the same tools, and if you're not using them and they are, then they have the advantage. But the technology itself isn't the advantage. You are. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a long time to do this. Start today, one foot after the other. Help other people, show up in your community, tell people what you need. And that's how you play the HI game. Thank you.